I was standing on the porch of my mother's house in Birmingham, Alabama, on the night of April 4th, 1968, when my neighbor Miss Odessa came running down the street screaming. She didn't have words at first, just that sound, a sound I had never heard from a grown woman before, a sound I hope I never hear again. Martin was dead, and I want to tell you something. I want to tell you what happened to this country in the months that followed, because I was there. I watched it. I lived through every single day of it. And when I look at what's happening right now, what you're living through, I feel something I haven't felt since that year. I feel the ground shifting beneath my feet the same way it did then. I'm 85 years old. My name is Solomon, and I have been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me what I actually saw. Nobody asked. So I'm going to tell you anyway, before my time runs out, because here is what I know that you don't. This has happened before. The rage, the division, the feeling that the whole country is a dry field and someone just lit a match. I've seen this. I survived this. And what I learned in 1968 is the only thing that matters right now, in whatever year you're watching this. Stay with me. What I'm about to tell you is not history. It's a warning. If what I'm saying is already hitting something in you, something you didn't expect to feel, then this channel was made for you. Subscribe, because I have more stories, and every single one of them ends with something you need to hear before it's too late. Let me take you back to before April 4th, because you have to understand what the world felt like before that night to understand what it felt like after. In Birmingham in 1968, I was 28 years old. I had just gotten my first real job, not a job they gave you because they had to, but a job I had fought for. I was working at a machine shop on the east side of town. I was the only black man on the floor, the only one. Every morning I put on my work clothes and I walked through that door, knowing that every single man in that building was watching to see if I would fail, not hoping I'd succeed, watching for failure, waiting for it like it was something they were owed. My foreman's name was Roy Denton. White man, about 50, from Anniston. He never called me by my name. Not once in 2 years. He called me Boy every single day. Boy, you're running that lathe wrong. Boy, slow down. Boy, I'm watching you. I was 28 years old, with a wife at home and a baby daughter I was trying to feed, and every morning I walked into that building and let a man call me boy so I could keep the lights on. I want you to sit with that for a moment, not as history, as a feeling, because that feeling, that choice between your dignity and your survival, that is something my people carried every single day, not once, not occasionally, every single day. And we did it. We showed up. We kept going, because we believed, we had to believe, that the country was moving somewhere better, that the movement was working, that Martin's voice was slowly, painfully bending that arc. And then April 4th came, and I stood on that porch and listened to Miss Odessa scream, and something broke, not just in me, in the air itself. Within 48 hours, 110 American cities were burning. I want you to understand that number. 110 cities. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore, Kansas City, Louisville, Detroit, which had already burned the summer before and hadn't even finished rebuilding. People look back now and they see the footage, the smoke, the National Guard, the broken glass, and they think they understand what they're seeing. They think they're watching anger. They think they're watching chaos. They're not. What you're watching in that footage is grief. Grief that had nowhere else to go. Because here is what nobody tells you about 1968. We weren't just mourning Martin. We were mourning the idea that peace was working. We had marched. We sang. We had been beaten on bridges and hosed down in streets. And we had kept walking, kept singing, and kept believing that the way through was through dignity. And they killed him anyway. My brother Curtis, he was 24, 3 years younger than me. He called me the morning after. He was in Chicago by then, had gone up during the Great Migration with my uncle in 1964. He said, "Solomon, it's over, the whole thing. They're never going to let us have it." I told him, "Curtis, don't do anything stupid." He said, "I'm already standing in the street. It's already done." That was the last conversation I had with my brother for 6 years, because what happened in Chicago in the weeks after April 4th sent Curtis to prison. Not for long, 18 months. But those 18 months cost him his job, his apartment, the woman he was going to marry. When he came out, he wasn't the same man who went in. A system will do that. Break a man not with a single blow, but with 1,000 small ones, until one day you look at him and the light behind his eyes is just different. I need you to understand something about Curtis. He wasn't a violent man. He was the smartest person in any room he walked into. He could fix anything, engines, radios, broken furniture. He had hands that understood how things worked, and this country took those hands and wasted them, wasted him, because he stood in a street in Chicago in April of 1968 and screamed at the sky. And I want to ask you something. What would you have done if you had grown up watching your father come home every night with his dignity scraped off like mud from a boot? If you had been told your whole life that your worth was conditional on the comfort of people who didn't see you as fully human, what would you have done? I'm not here to justify burning. I'm here to make you understand the fire, because you can't understand what's happening right now without understanding where this fire comes from. And it goes back further than 1968. It goes back further than any of us can see clearly. If this story is opening something in you, something that's been sitting closed for a long time, subscribe to this channel. I've got more. And the next one might be the one that finally breaks something open. Now I want to tell you about the summer of 1968, because April was just the beginning. By June, Bobby Kennedy was dead too. Shot in a hotel kitchen in Los Angeles 2 months after Martin. And I remember sitting in front of my mother's television set and watching the news anchor's face and thinking, they are killing everyone who is trying to hold this thing together. And the country just kept tearing. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago that August. I watched it on television. I watched the police beat young people in the streets outside. Watched the delegates inside screaming at each other. Watched the whole machinery of American democracy grinding itself apart in real time, live on national television. My mother, May, God rest her soul, she sat next to me on that old green couch, and she said something I have never forgotten. She said, "Solomon, this country doesn't know who it is." She was 61 years old. She had been born in 1907. She had lived through 2 world wars, the Depression, Jim Crow at its most vicious, and everything the movement had cost us. And in August of 1968, sitting in front of that television set, she said, "This country doesn't know who it is." I have been thinking about those words for 57 years. Because here is the thing about a country that doesn't know who it is. It cannot agree on what it's for. And when people cannot agree on what a thing is for, they cannot agree on how to treat each other within it. And when that breaks down, when the shared story falls apart, then every old wound tears open again. Every grievance that was never actually healed starts bleeding again. That is what I watched happen in 1968, and that is what I am watching happen right now. I want to be precise here. I am not going to tell you who is right and who is wrong in what's happening today. I am 85 years old, and I have earned the right to tell you that it is never that simple, and anyone who tells you it is that simple is selling you something. What I am going to tell you is what I learned in 1968 about what happens to people, to families, to communities, to the people you love, when a country tears itself apart, because that part is never on the news. The news shows you the fire. Nobody shows you what happens to the people standing in the ashes afterward. Here is what happens. You stop listening to each other, not because you decide to, because it becomes too painful, because every conversation about what's happening in the country becomes a referendum on whether the other person sees your humanity. And you cannot have that conversation every single day. You don't have that much left to give. I watched this happen in my own family after 1968. My father, Clarence, a quiet man, a churchman, a man who believed in the slow work of dignity. He stopped talking to his own brother Arthur over the events of that year. They had a fight about whether the riots were justified, and they never fully came back from it. Two brothers who had grown up in the same house, slept in the same bed as children, worked side by side for 30 years, silenced by an argument about a country that didn't fully claim either of them. They reconciled eventually. When my father Clarence was dying in 1979, Arthur came and sat by his bed for 3 days and held his hand. Clarence forgave him, and Arthur forgave him, and they cried together like children. But they lost 11 years. 11 years of Sunday dinners and grandchildren's birthdays and ordinary Tuesday phone calls. Gone. I think about those 11 years a lot these days, because here is what I want you to understand, what I need you to understand, because I don't have unlimited time left to say this. The country's argument is not worth your relationships. It is not worth your brother. It is not worth your father. It is not worth the people who shared your table and your history and your blood. I am not telling you to be silent. God knows I have never been silent when silence was wrong. I am telling you to be careful about what you let this moment cost you, because I have watched people sacrifice each other on the altar of being right about the country. And at the end, when the country has moved on to the next argument, they are left with nothing but the absence of the people they loved. Don't do that, please, I'm begging you. Now let me tell you what happened after 1968, because this is the part that nobody talks about, and this is the part that matters most for where you are right now. The country didn't end. I know that sounds like a small thing, but I want you to sit with it. In the fall of 1969, I was still going to work at that machine shop. Roy Denton was still calling me boy. Curtis was still in prison. My mother May was still sitting on that green couch watching the news and shaking her head. But we were still here, still working, still loving each other, still going to church on Sundays and cooking on Saturdays and watching our children grow up and find their way. That is not nothing. That is everything. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act passed. When in 1968 the Fair Housing Act passed in the same week Martin died, as if the country finally felt enough shame to move. In 1970, I got promoted at the machine shop. First black foreman they ever had. Roy Denton had to take orders from me for 2 years before he retired. Lord knows I was gracious about it, mostly. In 2008, I sat in front of a television set. A different one, a bigger one, a flat one my grandson had bought me. And I watched Barack Obama become President of the United States. And I thought about my mother, May, about what she said on that green couch in 1968. This country doesn't know who it is. Maybe. But it was still figuring it out. I'm not telling you things get easy. They do not get easy. I am telling you they move. Painfully, unevenly. To 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes 3 steps back. But they move. And the people who keep that movement alive are not the ones screaming the loudest on television. They are the ones who do the quiet, unglamorous work of staying present, staying connected, refusing to give up on the person in front of them even when the country is telling them to. That was my mother, May. That was my father, Clarence, even through all his silence. That was my community, my church, my neighbors, people who had every reason to abandon hope and chose, every single day, to carry it anyway. They are the reason I am here, the reason I survived 1968 and everything that came after, and the reason I can look you in the eye right now and tell you this is not the end. So here is what I want to leave you with. Here is what 85 years of watching this country fight with itself has taught me. First, the heat you feel right now is real. Don't let anyone tell you to calm down who has never had a reason to be this angry. The fire is real. Honor it. But second, fire will burn down your own house if you don't learn how to hold it. The question is never whether to feel the anger. The question is what you build with it. My people have been building things with their anger for 400 years. We built music and literature and community and church and resistance, and this is what I need you to hear. We built it together, not alone, together. Third, stop waiting for the country to tell you who you are. The country has never known who it is. That is not new. What is new is that you have more power than any generation before you to decide what it becomes. You have tools my generation didn't have. You have a voice my generation had to bleed for. Don't waste it on rage that feeds algorithms and changes nothing. Fourth, find one person on the other side of whatever divide you're standing on and just sit with them. Not to convince them, not to win, just to sit. Just to be 2 human beings who are both trying to make it through a world that is asking too much of everyone. That is where the actual work happens. Not on screens, in rooms, at tables, face to face. And fifth, and this one is the hardest, grieve what is already lost. Grieve it properly. Don't skip it. Don't go straight to anger because anger feels more powerful. Grief is what connects you to what you're fighting for. My mother May taught me that. The church taught me that. You cannot protect what you haven't mourned. I watched this country tear itself apart in 1968, and I watched it stitch itself back together, imperfectly, slowly, painfully, but back together. I watched it tear again and stitch again, over and over. That is what America is. That is what it has always been, a country in the permanent process of becoming. You are part of that becoming. You are not a bystander. You are not a passenger. You are the argument and the answer, both, at the same time. Don't you dare waste that. I'm Solomon. I'm 85 years old. I have buried friends and brothers, and a wife I loved for 52 years. I have been called things I will not repeat. I have been passed over and underpaid and underestimated my entire life. And I am still here, still talking, still believing that the truth told plainly to the right person at the right moment can change something. If you believe that too, subscribe to this channel, because I have more to say, and my time, like yours, is not unlimited. Don't let the fire burn what matters. Tend it, aim it, and build something with it that lasts longer than you do. That's all I've got for today. God willing, I'll see you next time.